as Jesus, went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" And Jesus said, neither this man or his parents sinned, but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. And so having said this, verse 6, he spit on the ground, follow this, spits on the ground, makes some mud with saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Okay, we read that like it's a normal thing. But come on, follow me. Maybe he's blind, and so he has no idea Jesus had made mud with spit. But here we go. So God told him, so he said, "Go and wash in the pool of Siloam." And so the man went and washed and came home seeing. Can you imagine that experience? I mean, just imagine for the first time being able to see a person. To be able to see the sky, to be able to see your parents, or the people that you've been in daily contact with. I mean, this is the greatest moment of this guy's life. And so verse 8, it says, his neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, "Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?" And verse 9, some claimed that he was. Others said, no, he only looks like him. And so you got to understand a little bit, this was unexplainable, because there had been cases of people who had been blinded through injury or throughout their life had been blinded and received their sight back. But no one born blind was able to be healed and get their sight back. And so so they're saying, no, listen, it can't be that guy because he was blind. And so they move on. But he himself insisted. He said, "No, I am the man." "Well, how then were your eyes open?" they demanded. He replied, "The man they call Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes," right? He leaves out the spit part. "He told me to go to Siloam and wash. And so I went and washed, and then I could see." And then they asked kind of a dumb question. "Where is the man?" they asked him. "I don't know. I was blind," right? You're with me here. And so, he said, "I don't know where he is." Verse 13, they brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. And now the day on which Jesus, right here, the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was the Sabbath. Come on, Jesus. You can't do that on the Sabbath, right? You can't do anything on the Sabbath. You can't heal a guy. And so the Pharisees... I lost my spot. I do this all the time. Therefore, the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. And so he tells the story again, right? And he gets more abbreviated. He's probably told it 15 times on the way over here, because people are like, "That's the dude that was blind." Okay, so he put mud on, this is what he says. He says, "He put mud on my eyes," the man replied, "and I washed, and now I see." Right? A shorter version of the story. Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." You gotta, after we continue the story from here, it starts to spiral a little bit out of control. It gets hilarious, actually. And so, but you have to understand something about the Pharisees, or about all of us. We all have a God box. We all have something in our lives, or some presuppositions about what God does and what God doesn't do. And so we operate off of that. And so if God doesn't work the way I think he should work, or the way I would work if I were God, then there is no God. Because that's not the way God would do it. And so the Pharisees had a God box, and their God box said, God does not heal people on the Sabbath. He doesn't work on the Sabbath. And so there's this God box. But there's other people in the group. They asked, how can a sinner do such miraculous signs? And so they were divided, and so we arrive at the crossroads of undeniability and unexplainability, right? And so there's no denying that the guy can see, but they can't explain it. And so finally they turned again to the blind man. What have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened. And so really what they're saying is, all right, what you need to do right now is you need to tell us how this happened, but you need to tell us in a way that it fits inside of our box. You need to make this work, so that you need to explain this, because if you don't explain it, it just doesn't work, because this is not how God operates. in my box, in my world. This is not what I was raised to believe. And so the man replied, he is a prophet. And the Jews still did not believe that he had been blind, all right? And they believed this sight until they sent for his parents. The only explanation that makes sense, right? And it's like, no, this guy cannot have been blind. There's no way. He's fooling us. He's messing with us. There's no way this is the guy, because it just doesn't make sense. It's unexplainable. Verse 19, is this your son? They asked. Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that now he can see? And they said, we know he's our son. That's undeniable, right? And we know he was born blind. That's undeniable. Verse 21, but how he can now see, or who opened his eyes, we don't know. It's unexplainable. And they said, ask him. How many times are they going to ask him? And so they said, ask him. He's of age. He will speak for himself. And so his parents said this, and this is key, because they were afraid of the Jews. First, already the Jews had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Christ would be put out of the synagogue. And they had already made up their minds about who Jesus was. They had already decided that he was against them, that he was not the Messiah, and that he was out to destroy God's world. And he was not who he says he is. And some of us have grown up in a home, in a world, in a culture that says Jesus is not what the Bible says, or Jesus is irrelevant, or there is no God, or God doesn't do these things. God doesn't change lives. God doesn't work. You know, all those people in that video, you know, is there a God? And some of them were like, sure, but he doesn't want anything to do with us. And there's millions of God boxes and we struggle with it. And so here's their God box, and Jesus does not fit in it. And so many of us are in that same situation. And so that's why his parents said,